reincarnation. In the case of people without a spirit, life begins as follows. As the fetal body is born in the womb, the soul is formed for the first time like sand on a beach that collects in the form of a castle and joins the body. This combination produces rudimentary consciousness. After birth, such a person becomes only a product of genetics and the environment due to the absence of spirit. Without a spiritual counterbalance, biological instincts and social programming become their primary impulses in life. After physical death, their soul evacuates the body, may contain a long-lasting imprint of the ego, and after a while it disintegrates and reabsorbs into the lake of energy from which it originally originated. None of their identities survive. For people without a spirit, this life is their only one. They are formed upon entry and dissolve upon exit. It cannot be otherwise if they lack the core of individualized consciousness. Thus everything that a spiritual person has due to the continuity of his incarnations is missing in the life of a person without a spirit. For example, the soulless would not need life lessons or spiritual learning experiences. What would be the purpose of making what you get disappear after death? Therefore, people without a spirit are those who cannot learn spiritual lessons, who cannot profit spiritually from the temptations of life, who cannot transfer what has been acquired to their successive incarnations. And so they don't care about the lessons of humility, empathy, compassion, understanding, or forgiveness. Instead of changing as people through spiritual maturation in life, they change only in terms of better adaptation to life through conditioning. For example, while a witty person can see the mistake of their ways and become a humble person without a spirit, she would simply learn not to be caught next time. Karma is another metaphysical factor that is absent in the lives of spiritless people. There are many misconceptions about karma, so I will first explain my understanding of it before showing how its absence affects the life of a spiritless person. Karma, negative type, is simply a spiritual debt or imbalance acquired by violating the free will of oneself or another. Violation of your own free will occurs when you make a choice during an ignorant state, as when you identify with the ego and act on its impulses, which violates the choice made during a spiritually more sober state. After committing a violation of free will, the higher aspect of consciousness associated with the spirit regrets the mistake and commits to correct it, even if the lower aspect related to the ego tries to ignore it. Karmic imbalance then attracts experiences that teach a lesson to correct that ignorance, either in this life or the next. The lesson learned is universal and does not require remembering the original choice that was prompted by just understanding the lesson. Karmic experience is not what is judged but a lesson learned, so karma can sometimes be alleviated by preventive understanding and forgiveness without necessarily learning the hard way through experience. But without spirit there is no true free will and no true lessons to be learned. Therefore, the soulless have no karma and instead live completely under the laws of chance and the law of the jungle. While a witty person can be born with karmic handicaps, because without spirit these handicaps would be strictly a matter of chance or birth and would not serve a higher metaphysical purpose. It is the same with the time and manner of their death, since witty people may have loosely planned their lives before incarnation, including the way in which spiritless people will die in accidental circumstances without purpose or meaning, unless their death in some way plays an important role in the spiritual individual's pre-incarnation scenario. Other missing factors include meaningful symbolic dreams of synchronicity with greater intuitive guidance and their personal hand of destiny. People without a spirit do not experience any of this because they cannot and should not. This should be obvious from understanding the role of the spirit, but I will elaborate for clarity. Meaningful dreams primarily serve to warn a person of spiritual imbalances that need to be corrected, but a person without a spirit has no need for such messages. They also have nothing more to send such messages. Without a permanent core of individuality, they do not have a higher self, which is a perfected future manifestation of the spirit that reaches back in time to help the extensions of themselves still in the linear past. And without the higher self, they do not have the inner intuitive guidance that would provide certain stimuli and protection in life. So, while a witty person could experience monstrous synchronicities and bending the laws of reality to save them from the untimely death of a person without a spirit who does not have such direction and protection would perish by chance. Chakra differences between spirits and without the spirit. There is also a difference between the witty and the heartless in which chakras they have. Chakras are vortic energy centers that connect the soul to the body and connect the spirit and the body through the soul. Each center positionally coincides with the major glands of the physical body, and each serves a different behavioral function. The lower chakras are associated with such aspects of behavior as physical instinct, sexual impulses, basic emotions, personal power, and intellectual activity. Everyone owns them. The soulless, however, do not need higher chakras, i.e., the heart, the crown, and the chakras of the third eye, because these are the ones that are exclusively connected with the spirit. The heart chakra is the center of higher emotions like empathy. Of spiritual jubilee is missing in the heartless because there is no spirit to connect with those emotions. The crown chakra, through which a greater intuitive understanding of originality and creativity and connection with objective truth is manifested. The third eye chakra, located between the eyebrows, is usually used to perceive phenomena and concepts outside the material realm, and people without a spirit limited to the world of the five senses also have no need for it. Therefore, another difference between the witty and the soulless is that the former has all 7 chakras while the latter lacks 3 higher heart crowns and the chakra of the third eye 5. This further contributes to the intuitive or clairvoyant perception that spiritless people are flat and inert on the inside no matter how animated they are on the outside, because the spectrum of their etheric or aura vibrations lacks certain colors and therefore lower overall resolutions. All of the above stems from one simple postulate, that some people lack spirit and therefore lack more chakras. If you think deeply about what this means, you will understand how this postulate explains the whole range of observations we have about so-called empty people. The difference between spiritless people and spiritually dormant people. At this point, you may be wondering what the difference is between spiritless people and witty people who sleep spiritually in life or are simply immature. After all, both can be secular in their goals and thoroughly caught in the illusion of a matrix. Both may not be aware of dreams or synchronicity nor show much empathy. For example, there are negative people who are completely influenced by their ego and external negative forces that can commit violent crimes and even mass murder without blinking an eye. Not everyone is spiritless. But they are all really emptiness of the influence of the spirit when it comes to engaging in such inhuman behavior. Some lack spirit, others lack spirit. The difference is that a lively but infantile, dormant person still has latent spiritual potential. So, they still have, even in small quantities, the presence of these above-mentioned spiritual factors and dynamics. They can still suffer the consequences of karmic debt caused by stupid choices. They can still get symbolic dreams trying to warn them of spiritual imbalances in life. Even if they ignore it, they can still experience synchronous help shaping their lives against looks even if they can't see it. People without a spirit do not fully have that potential. I can't grow spiritually. This is not a theoretical declaration, but a painful lesson learned from dealing with too many such individuals who have never shown any signs of growth or evolution, no matter how much help and opportunities for improvement have been given to them. They are adaptable at best, but more out of conditioning and calculation than real understanding. There is another important difference. Ghosts have lives appropriate to their spiritual needs. So, there is a correspondence between their spiritual maturity and their kind of life. The spirits of infants will lead rough lives because basic existence is all they need, and more would be too much for them to handle or get. Meanwhile, the heartless live regardless of the life in which they are led by circumstances and their own cunning, which can mean being a beggar corporate CEO or a famous author. Without the limitations established by spiritual needs, the soulless have no spiritual boundaries or curricula that structure their lives. And that is why empty people are not only spiritually asleep or infantile, because there is a class of people who share the same inertia behind their eyes regardless of the type of life, social status, intellectual skills and physical appearance. Psychopaths, sociopaths and daffodils. More extreme manifestations of the absence of the spirit are known in psychology as psychopathic, sociopathic, or narcissistic personality disorders. Witty people who respond to this condition are seduced and hostages of their ego, but can be rehabilitated. Instead of lacking empathy, their empathy is either repressed or displaced. These are not real psychopaths but witty people with personality disorders. True psychopathy and sociopathy, however, cannot be cured because something is fundamentally flawed at the core of such individuals. They lack empathy and remorse, and those traits cannot be recovered because they have never been there. The incurable nature of psychopathy is an accepted fact in psychology. The cause is believed to be an abnormality in the pain and fear centers in the brain. Nevertheless, without the balanced influence of the spirit, such abnormalities would introduce uncontrolled errors into the programming of the ego that then rages to the point of coming to the attention of the legal and medical systems. What the medical system can diagnose is only an extreme and disorderly manifestation of a condition that is more prevalent in the entire population. Other spiritless people with a properly functioning ego better keep their lack of empathy and remorse camouflaged under more refined social programming. Why without a spirit? What others say. Theories abound about why some people do not have a higher component of their consciousness and what purpose they serve in the larger scheme of things. Since I am not the first to make this observation, I will now briefly discuss what others have said so that you can weigh the options available. John Baines writes in his book Starman that humans, like all animal species, have a collective soul unique to their species. This collective unconscious has a de-individualizing impact on people by pushing them towards the mafia mentality, the herd mentality and following the crowd. Rupert Sheldrake would call this the human morphogenetic field. People who have not developed their own conscious individuality are just automata that follow the dormant influence of the collective unconscious as if they are extensions of the hive mind. The goal of esoteric training is to separate from the herd to develop one's own will and thus become a free being. Rudolf Steiner expressed similar feelings. His seminal work, The Philosophy of Freedom, dealt with this problem. Steiner said that as long as humans submit to external authority by their own biological instincts or animalistic parts of themselves that are common to the rest of humanity, they are not free beings. Freedom stems from choice based on an intuitive understanding of what each option entails and what it means. This act of free will requires introspection and a spiritual ability to act from a place of true understanding. Steiner acknowledged that not all introspections are to the extent necessary to make intelligent free will choices. In private debates, Steiner went even further. That LK girl in first grade has to have something really bad inside. We can't do much. Such cases increase in which children are born with a human form but are not really human beings in relation to their highest selves. Instead, they are filled with beings who do not belong to the human class. Quite a number of people have been born since the 1990s without me, that is, they are not reincarnated but human forms are filled with some kind of natural demon. There are quite a number of older people who are not actually human beings but are only natural, they are human beings only in relation to their form. However, we cannot create a school for demons. Teacher, how is that possible? Dr. Steiner, cosmic error is certainly not impossible. The relationships of individuals coming into earthly existence have long been determined. There are also generations in which individuals have no desire to come into earthly existence and be connected to the flesh or leave immediately at the very beginning. In such cases, other beings who are not quite suitable also give way. It is something that is now very common for human beings to go around without me. They are not really human beings but have only a human form. They are beings like spirits of nature that we do not recognize as such because they move in human form. They are also quite different from human beings in relation to everything spiritual. They, for example, can never think of such things as sentences. They have a memory only of words and not of sentences. The riddle of life is not that simple. When such a being dies, it returns to the nature from which it came. The corpse decays but there is no real dissolution of the etheric body and the natural being returns to nature. It is also possible for something like a vending machine to happen. The whole human organism exists, and it is possible to automate the brain and develop some kind of pseudo-morality. I don't like to talk about such things because we were often attacked even without them. Imagine what people would say if they heard us say that there are people who are not human beings. Yet those are the facts. Our culture would not be in such a decline that people feel more strongly that a certain number of people are going around who they are because they have become completely ruthless, have become something that is not human but demons in human form. G.I. Gurdjieff spoke on the same line. His lectures in Real World Views summarize his position. Humans are born as empty shells, as biological machines without self-awareness. At some point in life, a person either develops an eye or branches out in the opposite direction to further mechanization and decay. So according to Gurdjieff, empty people are those who have never developed their self-awareness as they should, but we all start equally. I don't believe this is true because there are infants and children who obviously have high feelings behind their eyes and expected self-awareness behavior, while other infants and children lack it, suggesting a factor of reincarnation in some people and complete absence of spirit, including potential for spirit in other people. Boris Moraviev wrote most extensively on the subject of people without a spirit. Take a look at his 3 volumes of the Gnosis series, especially the second and third volumes. His approach is based on esoteric Christianity, so he cites the scriptures extensively and at the same time has much in common with Gurdjieff's Fourth Way tradition, which in itself seems to lead to Sufi teachings. According to Moraviev's interpretation of the Book of Genesis, there were people before Adam and Eve, but only Adam and the proxy Eve and her descendants received a breath of spirit from God. So today there are 2 mixing sub-races of people, pre-Adamic without spirit and Adamic who have it. Moraviev explains that the pre-Adamic serve the purpose of harvesting energy from the Adamic as part of the cosmic food chain. He also explores the metaphysical differences between them in relation to the pre-Adamics who lack certain centers that are analogous to the chakras. Moraviev believes that the pre-Adamic have a group soul unique to their collective and that only after further eons of evolution will their collective soul differ into individual spirits like what the Adamics already have. The Corpus Hermeticum, a well-known Hermetic and Gnostic text written almost 2,000 years ago, also states that not all people have a spark of divine reason, called Nu, active in themselves, and that without Nu man is more like an irrational creature, animal, in its limited motivations, perception and lifestyle. The entire text should be read to understand this in an appropriate context. See the English translation entitled The Way of Hermes. New translations of the Corpus Hermeticum, Inner Traditions 2000. Finally, the Cassiopeian transcripts deal with Moraviev's work and provide some key insights into the subject matter. The channeling source claims that some people are empty portals through which other intelligences will work, that they have uniform auras and no more chakras. Our energy can be siphoned to collect negative hyperdimensional beings. All this is in accordance with my observations and the writings of Moraviev and Gurdjieff, except for a little more realistic than the views of these 2 traditionalists. While John Bain says that some people are extensions of the human collective soul, the Cassiopeians say that instead of extensions of certain souls, they are an animal group. So what I am saying in this article is not unprecedented. I just observed empty people 1999 to 2001 on my own and then circled through various personal speculations and existing theories before agreeing to the current one explained in this article. I believe there are several ways people end up without a spirit. Some are born that way because no ghost has ever taken root, just like theater seats that remain empty because no one has bought tickets for them. Others may have started with the spirit but had it go away at some point in life. He could have been evacuated by abuse or sudden extreme trauma, or gradually evaporated from a decade of soul-killing routines. Not everyone who dies necessarily dies. People can continue to exist as hollow shells, as echoes of the former self now without the spirit that once gave them a spark. I am talking here mainly about a larger sector of the population which naturally lacks the spirit it has always had throughout history, and which, due to its predatory and secular nature, has gravitated to the top of social, economic and political hierarchies and made the world antagonistic to spiritual impulses. Benefits of understanding. As you can see, this idea that some people lack spirit explains a lot about the robotic, animalistic, predatory side of humanity. Many of us are under the false assumption that we are all the same inside, that if we walked in someone else's shoes, we would fully understand their motivations. But not all inhuman acts trace back to mere environmental variables. There are cases where even if we put ourselves in their shoes, we would not act the same. This is because the cause of their motivations is not environmental but metaphysical, the absence of spirit and the supreme rule of the ego. Those who ignore the possibility of spiritless people will continue to shake their heads in frustration at behaviors they simply cannot calculate and must either ignore or rationalize. For example, when it comes to a psychopath without a spirit, such individuals are easily deceived and manipulated. It is only after they are brick again that they realize that some people are a different kind of animal, that some people are not corrective because they behave completely unhealthily in accordance with their predatory nature without spirit. This is especially true of the psychopathic elite that runs this prison planet. They cannot rehabilitate themselves to see the error of their ways or be convinced through appeals to empathy. Caution in conclusion. However, it would not be wise to look at the heartless with contempt. They are what they are, living their lives in line with their makeup. They should not be treated differently from the way a wild animal is treated in accordance with its wildlife. Just trying to keep the heartless to higher spiritual standards leads to frustration. Not expecting too much from them and understanding why they behave like them, frustration gives way to peaceful insight. Nor is it worth the effort to try to spot who is spiritless, because in ambiguous cases you will probably be wrong on the side of paranoia. Since heartless behaviors form a subset of the behaviors of witty people, only behaviors unique to spiritual people can allow for quick and definite identification, and then only who is definitely witty. Spotting only works to select who is truly witty, which is easiest to do with a witty individual on your wavelength. You will feel the life in their eyes, clear and unique energy behind their words, and originality and independence behind their thought processes. Appendix I. Frequently asked questions. How do I know I'm not a spiritless person? If you have experienced one quality unique to the spirit, then you are not without the spirit. The very fact that you asked yourself that you are insecure and want to know for sure shows self-awareness and introspection, which is another trait of the spirit. Regardless, it is better to assume that you have a spirit and are working on developing its qualities such as intuition, empathy and lucidity, all while being aware of your lower selfish impulses and preventing action on them. I guess my friend, spouse, parent, person is spiritless. What should I do? Take a moment to ask if they are funny or not, and focus solely on whether you can continue to be with them. Are they so manipulative, exhausting, abusive, or otherwise detrimental to your well-being that you have to run away? If so, then it doesn't matter if they have a spirit or not. Are they so friendly and easy that you are doing quite well in life? If so, then it doesn't matter if they have a spirit or not. So, from a practical perspective, you just have to worry about whether you can handle having them in your life. Where the difference between the witty and the heartless comes to the fore in dealing with psychopathic people, where even after promising to change they keep coming back to their violent ways, then at some point, instead of rationalizing that they are just wrong and need even more time and attention, it is better to conclude that they may be behaving perfectly in line with what they really are. Naive people who think everyone is equally good on the inside will continue to rationalize and take abuse, but those with higher understanding will sooner recognize the warning signs of futility and save themselves from trouble. How is it that this concept of people without a spirit is not in some way divisive, racistly persecutory, and antithetical to the idea of human equality, of unity, of harmony and brotherhood? If the theory is true that some people actually lack spirit, then the truth about it should not be ignored for the sake of political correctness. When properly applied, knowledge can lead to greater stability and harmony in the long run. For example, every attempt at a utopian society failed because it was based on naive assumptions about the composition of its citizenship. Selfish, psychopathic, predatory individuals end up corrupting utopia. If utopia is based on a full understanding of such types, then measures to prevent corruption could be introduced. Nor should the theory be blamed for the consequences of its misapplication. Those who misuse it use it as a means of satisfying their own ego instead of applying it from a spiritual perspective. Instead of rejecting the theory because of its misapplication, better efforts should be made to prevent its misapplication. The ultimate unity of all life can be recognized without sacrificing awareness of the functional diversity that encompasses it, and only by a proper understanding of each part of that unity can the whole be recognized in full clarity instead of mere ignorant bliss. Appendix 3. Permutations of metaphysical components. To demonstrate the necessity of concepts such as spirit, body, etheric and astral, here is a list of how these components combine into different types of entities. As you will see, the difference between these entities cannot be explained with less than these components. Elementary matter. Body. Crystals and plants. Body ethereal. Average animals. Body ethereal, astral. People without spirit. Body ego, ethereal, astral. Funny people. Body ego, ethereal, astral, the ghost. Humorous people after deciding to embody the first phase. Astral, the ghost. Humorous people after deciding to embody the second phase. Ethereal, astral, the ghost. Humorous people just before birth. Body ethereal, astral, the ghost. Humorous people after childhood. Body ego, ethereal, astral, the ghost. Witty people after physical death. Ego, ethereal, astral, the ghost. Humorous people after the second death during the afterlife. Duh. Spiritless people after embryo creation. Body ethereal. People without spirit just before birth. Body ethereal, astral. People without spirit after childhood. Body ego, ethereal, astral. People without spirit after physical death. Ego, ethereal, astral. People without spirit after the second death. Nothing artificial humanoids. Body ego, ethereal. Etheric forms of thought and astral flora and fauna. Ethereal, astral. Angelic beings. Astral, the ghost. Demon beings. Ego, ethereal, astral. Witty astral projectors. Ego, astral, the ghost. Essential aliens and transcendent humans. Ethereal, astral, the ghost. Notes. 1. In case anyone wonders why we need concepts like the spirit of the astral and the etheric at all, it is because they form the simplest model that explains the great body of known observations according to Occam's razor. People who ridicule the necessity of such metaphysical differences and believe only in the body or only in the body and soul omit certain key observations, so their oversimplified model is sufficient for their smaller set of giving. However, the model must be extended to include observations of psychics perceptively perceptive and all who have experienced the paranormal. At the same time, additional notions of the spirit of the astral soul and ethericness enter the picture. I believe these are the minimum components needed to explain people without a spirit. But that explains a lot more, just look at Appendix 3. However, these terms are also not just ad hoc explanations. Instead of being just theoretical etheric and astral bodies, they can be experienced directly through astral projection and visible by psychics. 2. Amit Goswami explains with great insight how non-deterministic consciousness acquires deterministic properties by conditioning in the physical body, how quantum systems can acquire classical characteristics. See chapters 13 and 14 of his book The Self-Conscious Universe. 3. What does it mean that the ego is imprinted on the etheric component of the soul? First, it connects with much that Rudolf Steiner wrote about the etheric double, the double of the mysterious side of the shadow that is antagonistic to our spiritual well-being. He also links Steiner, who mentions that in Asia, where ancestral worship is common, demonic beings can carry the discarded etheric shells of the deceased and thus receive all the psychic energy given to that identity during worship. Furthermore, the ego that continues after death in etheric form can explain certain types of spirits as well as the problem of astral, etheric deceivers in channeling, where the negative being can closely mimic a deceased relative. All these phenomena suggest that some part of the worldly identity of a person, ego, survives death, and since it cannot be through the physical body, it must be the next closest thing, the etheric component of the soul. Finally, when it comes to true artificial intelligence and quantum computers and cybernetic beings, it should be expected that they will be accompanied by an etheric field, just as plants have an etheric field that would help artificial intelligence have a level of life rather than being just a deterministic machine with a pseudo-random output. 4. The term second death is biblical. He who overcomes will not be hurt by another death. Revelation 2:11. Both death and hell were thrown into the lake of fire. This is the second death. And whosoever was not found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire. Revelation 20:14-15. Boris Moraviev and the Cassiopeans would interpret this roughly as follows: to overcome means to develop the spirit. The second death is the dissolution of the etheric and astral components of the soul, and the lake of fire represents the undifferentiated group soul into which the soul dissolves. What does fire do other than melt and turn to ash, removing all traces of previous recognizability? The second death occurs after the first death. If the first death is the death of the physical, then the second must be the death of the non-physical. I believe in this interpretation because it makes sense. 5. Higher means higher in function and not positionally higher in the body, so the throat chakra is not a higher chakra because it is related only to speech and intellectual functions. In the fourth way system, it correlates with the lower intellectual center. It probably evolved along with the human ability to speak and abstract thinking, something that most animals lack. That is why people without a spirit have a throat chakra, and that is why they can be intellectually sharp and have no limitations in their speaking abilities. So it is one of the lower chakras in terms of function,